Hello students, I am teacher Svetlana, and in our today's lecture we will learn about the basic principles of life, which is covered in the chapter The Living World. This is the first chapter in your biology textbook. So let's get started. Students, our planet Earth is made up of abiotic and biotic components. Now, the biotic components are obviously the living beings present around us. The question is, why do we call them living and how do they differ from the non-living? Have a look at the image here. I have listed the biotic as well as the abiotic components, which we normally call as living things and non-living things. We are very well familiar with these living and non-living things. Now, have a look at this image here. Can you find out all the living or the biotic factors in this image? Now, there are certain principles which help us to find out the things that are living as well as non-living around us. So let us have a look at these principles. The basic principles of life. A living being once produced, that is born, has to survive. For survival, it needs energy and many chemical molecules. And for this energy, it has to perform metabolism. Here, have a look at this image here. You can see the child is consuming his food, which we call as nutrients, obtains and stores the energy from the nutrients, and then utilizes this energy to do work. So all the reactions that are involved in this process is called as metabolism. So metabolism is the breaking of molecules. You have catabolism and making of new molecules, that is anabolism. Have a look at this image here. A catabolism or catabolic reaction is where you have a complex molecule and which is broken down to simple substances with the release of energy. And in anabolism, which we also called as anabolic reactions, you have simple molecules which come together and consume certain amount of energy and give you a complex molecule in return. So both these reactions are collectively called as metabolisms. Students, the next basic principle of life is, from birth onwards, organisms show tendency of growth and development. This growth is a well-orchestrated process. Have a look at this image here. You can see a single cell onwards shows you growth. That is, it is multiplying here and increasing in number. You may have sand, molds, boulders grow, etc. This growth is not from within, and hence these are non-living beings. Have a look at this image here. You can see a tiny seed which is under the soil. It starts growing from within and a life is generated which gives rise to an entire new plant. So this is the characteristic of growth of living organism. That is, the growth is from within. The next principle of life is growth and development. These two factors are not the processes which have an unlimited time span. At certain point of time, the molecules, organs, systems begin to lose their effective working and they become old. This is aging process of the body. If you have a look at the human life cycle, you will see that after completing a number of stages, the end stage is the aging. We are aging in the process, and you will see the old onset of the old age at the end of the life cycle. So this growth and development is not having an unlimited time span. It is having a very limited time span. Then moving further, students, life has to continue. Hence, the organisms try to produce a young one like itself. It is possible due to reproduction. There are two modes of reproduction, asexual mode and the sexual mode of reproduction. This ensures continuity of a race. Mules, sterile worker bees do not reproduce, yet they are living. So can you call reproduction as the inclusive characteristics of life? It is one of the important factors to consider an organism living, but it is not the only factor which will help you decide whether an organism is living or non-living. At the same time, as the body loses its capacity to perform metabolism, the organism dies. So these are the principles that are helping you decide whether the organism is living or not living. Let us have a look at the principles ahead. Any living being responds to thermal, chemical, or biological changes in the surroundings. What are these changes that I am talking about? One such is homeostasis. That is, students, our body tries to adjust to the climate around it. For example, we have shivering and we warm up the body in cold environment, and there is sweating to cool down the body in warm environment. So the body regulates the internal environment to maintain stability. So this is the response given to a thermal change in the surrounding. And then we also have chemical or biological changes that is happening, which we also called as response to stimulus. For example, trees, they shed leaves in the fall season to respond to temperature changes. Then we have chameleon, which changes color in response to mood, temperature, health, and light. Then we have sunflower that tracks the sun across the sky from east to west. So these is a unique property of all living beings. That is, it can adapt to its environment. Have a look at this image here. You have a polar bear which has a thick layer of bubbles and furs to adapt to the cold environment. Then you have the catkis, which has root system and body adapted to collect and store water, spines to reduce water loss and keep away animals. So this is an adaptation to the desert environment. Then we have giraffes has long neck, helps to feed at the high levels in the tree tropis savanna adaptation. So this is how the living organisms adapt and try to survive in the environment that they are. So this is a unique property of living organism. So among the principles that we have seen so far, metabolism is one of the most important property which helps us to identify whether the organism is a living organism or not a living organism. So students, here you can have the look at the characteristics of living things at one glance. We have different levels of organizations. They are made up of cells. Living organisms can reproduce, they obtain and use energy, they grow and develop, and then they respond to the environment. So these are the important characteristics which help you identify whether the organism is living organism or not. Students, there is also immense diversity in living organisms. Since time immemorial, variety of organisms are living together on Earth. How will you understand this interrelationship between living and non-living, as well as between two living organisms? Now, in order to understand these interrelationships, that is between the living and the non-living, as well as between the two living beings or groups of organisms, systematic study of this is essential. Now, why systematic study of this is essential? First, to understand that, have a look at this image here. There are two different ecosystems that are shown here. The first one is showing you an aquatic ecosystem. You can see here you have the producers, primary consumers, the secondary consumers, the tertiary consumers. You are aware of our food chain. So here you can see that you have the rooted plants and the phytoplanktons which act as the producers. Then you have the zooplanktons which feed on them, which act as the primary consumers. Then the fish acts as the secondary consumers who feeds on the zooplankton. And then you have the turtle who acts as a tertiary consumer who feeds on the fish. So here also you can see that there are certain elements that are non-living, that is the sunlight, water, and you have certain elements that are living. So there is an interrelationship between the living and the non-living organisms. In this image also you can see the tree here is acting as the producer, but it is dependent on non-living factors like water, soil, sunlight. It is taking in utilizing the sunlight, taking in carbon dioxide. So these are all abiotic components. It is giving out oxygen. These producers are then fed upon by the primary consumers. The primary consumer is fed upon by the secondary consumers. So here also you can see that the living and the non-living are showing a interrelationships. So it is very important to understand these interrelationships. So how can we study these interrelationships? Let us have a look at it. So students, our question is, how do we study the diversity in the living world? Diversity is the differences among the organisms that are present in our ecosystem, or the organisms that are living together in a particular ecosystem or in closely related ecosystems. You have something called as taxonomic aids. Now, taxonomic study of various species of plants, animals, and other organisms are useful in agriculture, forestry, industry, and in general in knowing our bioresources and their diversity. These studies would require correct classification and identification of organisms. So, biologists have established certain procedures and techniques to store and preserve the information as well as the specimens. Some of these are explained to help you understand the usage of these aids. These are called as your taxonomic aids. We have the herbarium, botanical gardens, museums, zoological parks, keys, flora, manual, monograms. Now, this data, which is important, this data is found out of extensive research, and a lot of scientific bases are required for collecting this information. So if we need to study this diversity, these aids become very important. So let us have a look at these aids individually. Students, intensive laboratory and field studies are done in order to identify and classify a particular organism, and hence there is a need for a meaningful use of the collected data. So this collected data is stored in these different forms. The first one here is herbarium. So in an herbarium, the plant specimen is dried and it is preserved with all its information written on it. So like this it is stored. So you can just go to an herbarium and get information on any plant species that is available. Then you have botanical gardens. Now here in this case, you will find the living plants in their natural habitat. So you can just visit there, you can see how it grows in different seasons, how the plant behaves. So all this can be studied with the help of the botanical gardens. Then the next taxonomic aids are the museums. Most of us must be aware about museums. You have different types of museums. You have museums related to plants, you related to animals, extinct animals, then also the informations of living animals. There are certain museums who have entire evolutionary history, certain museums which have the archaeological history. So these museums helps us to get a lot of knowledge about the extinct animals or the lost world. So it helps us to relate the animals in the past with the present, and will help us to understand how evolution takes place. Then the next aid is a biodiversity park. A biodiversity park are actually the zoos and the sanctuaries where the animals are protected and conserved in their natural habitat. Have a look at this map here. It shows us the places in entire India where you can find these different animals, and they are preserved in their natural habitat, so that they are conserved and you can study them as well as you can protect them. So this is a step for them to be protected in their natural environment. And while they are still in their natural environment, a lot of studies and research can be done on them, which gives us a lot of information about the animal world as well as the plant world. Thank you, students, for participating in this lecture. We will meet soon again with the next topic. Till then, take care, be safe, and keep learning. Thank you.